أنت لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To our dear viewers, welcome back again. And we're glad that everyone can join us in this very vital and important podcast. We're going to deal with something a bit sensitive today, and the developments of what has inspired or transpired in Palestine and this whole issue. Today we have with us a very special guest to discuss this issue with, Brother Tāhir Hirzullah. Our brother is a director of outreach and grassroots outreach with American Muslims for Palestine, AMP, if you guys have heard of them. And they do a lot of activism surrounding the issue and the plight that has stricken our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And so, assalamu alaikum, how are you doing, Brother Tāhir?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Appreciate you guys having me on. Your beautiful show, mashallah.
Jazakumullah khairan. And, I wish it was under, better circumstances that we have to call you in. But alhamdulillah, let's get into it. I think a lot of things have been happening generally in the world. If you look at it, we have wars happening, and it's very active. Mm-hmm. People are talking about, some people are talking about Armageddon. Some people are talking about World War III and all this stuff here. But let's start in the beginning. I want to talk about the origins of all this, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple of days ago, you had an attack that was initiated by Hamas on the Israeli Defense Forces and all this. And this was a retaliation for what has been ensuing and the attacks and the brutalization and the oppression, especially the desecration of Masjid al-Aqsa.
That's right.
Right. And so let's talk about, in a nutshell, if you can briefly explain to us what actually happened, because there's a lot of people saying a lot of things, and that you also have mainstream media trying to take control of the narrative. And so we want to reclaim it and give the truth. So, تفضل.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. You brought up a good question because you want us to talk about the context.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important thing to talk about, because that's been missed from the mainstream media narrative. If you watch all the TV channels right now, CNN, Fox News, everybody's talking about October 7th as the date that was the start of everything. An unprovoked attack, right? And that's the language they're using. Yeah. So this is a problem. This is a problem because this reduces what's been taking place in Palestine to October 7th, and that's not accurate. That's not true, and that's a deception that's being deployed by Israel and its propagandists to essentially paint the Palestinian people as these bloodthirsty animals that just want to unprovoked go kill Jews. And that could not be further from the truth. So if we want to talk about this, we do have to step back. We do have to step back. We could step back for the year. We could step back for the past 16 years. We could step back for the past 75 years. You know what I'm saying? And see what's going on in Palestine. In the past year alone, right, from January to October 2023, right before October 7th, Israel had killed more Palestinians in that period than the past 3 years combined. Right? So you're talking about 207 Palestinians.
Wow.
Right? They were killing one Palestinian every single day.
Wow.
Okay, in Palestine. And so you have a situation in the West Bank that's volatile. You have a situation in Masjid al-Aqsa where Israeli settlers are making incursions. They're attacking it. Israeli army blocks Musallin from going inside the masjid.
And this is beautiful. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Very, very important point, because one of the things too that we have more access to is the visuals, the videos. So before, it's not just stories anymore. This is not just Facebook
you're
posts
seeing it
about
yourself.
people that are there. These are actual videos where you can see settlers going into throwing bombs, harming people, instigating, subhanAllah.
you know, we had what's called the pogrom in 3 Palestinian towns this year: Hawara, Sinjil, and Turmus Aya. 3 Palestinian villages were attacked by Israeli settlers, unprovoked. That's unprovoked. They illegal settlers, mind you. They're not supposed to be there according to international law. They went in, burned people's homes, burned people's cars, killed a Palestinian green card holder, a U.S. green card holder in Turmus Aya. They besieged a Palestinian American legislator from Illinois in his home with his family, right? And so this was all going on throughout the whole year. This was happening since January. Masjid al-Aqsa, but mind you, a lot, like if you've been to Masjid al-Aqsa? Haven't had the privilege?
I want to go.
Inshallah, one day, you know, we all get to go together and pray in a liberated Al-Aqsa.
Absolutely. I mean,
SubhanAllah, you know, people don't realize this, but like in between Salah, like between Dhuhr and Asr, for example, the Israeli army kicks out everybody and you're not allowed to be in there anymore. The settlers have exclusive access to your own prayer place.
So they're walking in there.
Yes.
With shoes on.
Yes. They're desecrating the land of Masjid al-Aqsa. So until you have this situation going on, and then on top of that, you have the Palestinian women who are the defenders of Al-Aqsa. They call them the Murabitat. Okay? They go in and they, with their bodies, right, take up space so that the Israelis and the settlers don't take it. And so the Israeli army and the police were beating them up on camera.
Yes. Beating
these women up. Okay? And so what do you think the reaction is going to be? Right? What do you think people are going to do? You think Palestinians are going to remain docile victims while Israel continues to do this? That's one aspect of the context that we need to talk about. The other aspect of the context that we need to talk about is the 16 years of siege on Gaza. Do you know what it's like to live under siege, man? Do you know what it's like to be suffocated? Do you know what it's like to not have access to adequate food and water? I went to Gaza, man, in 2009, bro. I turned on the faucet, subhanAllah, to wash my face to make wudu. The water was salty. The water was salty. Why? Because the water aquifer in Gaza was destroyed by the settlers when they were there before 2005. Then people have to pump water from the sea. So when you have to pump water from the sea, you have to put them through what's called desalination plants. There's these plants that they basically remove the salt from the water. You guys here, engineers, you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, in Gaza they have those. The problem is Gaza doesn't always have power. Israel controls the power supply to Gaza. So desalination plants and sanitation systems require power. If you don't have power, what are you going to do? The sewage, you know, subhanAllah, man. I was driving in Gaza in 2009. On the coast, and I smell this wretched smell. We're at the beach. I'm like, yo, guys, what is this? Oh, they're like, oh, we can't properly dispose of our sewage, so it just flows into the ocean. So, what kind of situation can people live under? So, what do you expect to happen? Then, you know, with all that in mind, since 2008, Israel has bombed Gaza on at least 5 different occasions: 2009. 12, 14, 21, and now 2023. And each time they kill in the thousands. In 2009, they killed 1,400 people. In 2014, they killed more than 2,000 people in 51 days. Okay, in these past 5 days, you know how many people they killed already? 1,400 Palestinians. The numbers are going up as we speak. This is going to be the deadliest Israeli offensive in the history of Gaza. Okay, so, and you know what they call it? They call it mowing the lawn.
Yeah, I heard some of the language and phrases they use as well.
The genocidal language they use. So, suffering from every side. Killing and murder and suffocation. So what do you expect the Palestinians in Gaza to do? Do you think they're going to just remain there hoping and praying that something changes? Or they're going to take action, they're going to take things into their own hands and try to end this suffering? Right? And when you look at Gaza, and you look at what the events of the past 5-6 days, it's the quintessential example of acts of desperation. The world is not listening. The world doesn't care. The world is actually supporting what Israel is doing. The Arab regimes are normalizing relations with Israel despite what Israel is doing to us. So what do you want us to do? Your back's against the wall. You're being cut up. You're being starved. People are going to explode. There's gonna be a point where it's gonna be a boiling point.
Yeah.
But that's it. And then we've already reached that boiling point. When the United Nations issued a report in 2014, said that Gaza will be unlivable for human beings by the year 2020.
SubhanAllah.
Okay, this is an official UN report.
Wow.
Man, Gaza was already unlivable at that time when they issued that report. It was like, what are you guys even talking about? So it's important for us to really understand that context. When we understand what's going on, because right now the mainstream narrative is that Israelis are the victims.
Yes.
Settlers are the victims. The Israeli military is the victim. They were surprised by this attack. The Israeli intelligence failure. SubhanAllah, man.
Yeah.
You're telling me that a superior military force, like the Israeli military, supported and funded by the United States of America, the world's strongest country, with the most sophisticated military technology in the world.
The highest technology.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're talking about drones, F-16s, F-22s, F-35s, JDAM rockets, bunker buster missiles, guided precision instruments, surveillance,
Iron Dome,
AI stuff that they use now.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about the most sophisticated military technology in the world. And you tell me 400 dudes
just breached it. This
messed you up?
Yeah.
So part of their response is embarrassment.
Yeah.
And that's why the rampage is going on the way it is. And part of their response is arrogance.
Yes.
Because they never thought this could happen.
And what's interesting, I think this correlates to a verse in the Quran. If you read the opening chapter of Surah Al-Hashr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, he says, فَأَتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُونَ. These are people who they thought their walls would protect them, and they thought they would be, hiding from Allah Azza wa Jal. And then Allah's amr came from a place in which they did not expect. And so this goes to show you that oppression is something that is never long-lived, and it will come to an end, and it will come to destroy the ones that are inflicting it. Eventually it will. Sooner or later, it's a matter of time, right? And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, for those type of people. And some of the stuff you said, it took the world by shock. The international community was surprised. How could all these defenses and all this stuff, how could it falter? And so this goes to show that I think there's some divine work. There's some divine interference happening here that the people don't understand, right? And so this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadr at the end of the day. But it's also important to know the context and not to, restrict it to parties and things that were happening and people getting killed, right? The question is, when did this all start? When was it, right?
Yeah.
And so could you take us back to the beginning?
Yeah.
Please?
Yeah. I mean, for those of your listeners who are probably thinking like, man, this, they've been hearing like this is a intractable conflict. This is never going to be solved. This is a centuries long conflict between Muslims and Jews, and there will never be a solution. And there's just gonna we have to wait till Qiyamah comes and Mahdi and solves it. We hear this sometimes, and this is false. There is no centuries long conflict between Muslims and Jews. That is patently false. That's not historically accurate.
I remember when I was working at Walmart, there was like a white guy I worked with, and when we talked about this issue, he was an older guy, and he said, well, haven't the Muslims and Jews been fighting for centuries? And this is a narrative that the mainstream media puts out, and they've successfully.
Well, this is a narrative that the Israelis like to promote.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
Because
which is interesting.
If you tell Americans that this is too complicated for you to understand, let us deal with it. That means they're basically saying, we know how to deal with these dudes. We know how to deal with these savage Muslim Palestinians. Right. Let us deal with it. All you guys got to do is understand them as savage Muslims, and let us do the rest.
And they just submit to it.
Right. but that dehumanizes the Palestinians.
Absolutely.
And it allows Israel to continue
There you
its
go.
massacres and genocide of Palestinians, right?
Yes.
So this narrative is very dangerous, and we've been dealing with the brunt of that.
Sorry.
You know, I've been on media interviews. I was on NPR yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing different interviews left and right, and you're kind of dealing with this misconception, this perception all the time. It's an uphill battle. I mean, you're not only talking about what's happening in Palestine,
Yeah.
but you're also like trying to make them understand that you're a human being, which is crazy.
Which is so sad. This is like the fact that you have to convince people like, hey, you know, these guys are humans. You know, it's so sad it has gotten to this point where even the Palestinians, I actually don't know any country in which something like this is happening. It's
There isn't.
Unique.
There isn't.
Right? To where the international community is like, yeah, these animals, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's something that it's totally contradicts everything the United Nations stands for. Any of their,
Palestine is that place
yes,
where the powers of the batil and falsehood all coalesce and try to influence the way that people think about these things. I mean, they're out there saying that Hamas committed a savage act of terrorism by killing civilians.
yes.
But then they're coming back and saying, we have to kill civilians because of what Hamas did. What?
When they have you.
So who's the terrorist?
Yes. And I think
Okay, let's say Hamas is wrong. They killed civilians. Okay, let's say we'll accept that. But what about you?
Yeah.
What about the 6,000 Palestinians that you've killed since 2008 in Gaza, bro?
SubhanAllah.
What about the thousands of children that have been starved and died from malnutrition? How about that, huh?
And the displacement.
How about the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced? You know, vast majority of Gaza's population are refugees. They're not even from Gaza, bro. They're from the areas around Gaza, subhanAllah. So you want to take it back, we'll take it back. And the root cause of this is, at the end of World War I, in the early 1900s, in the 1910s, the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over Palestine, is the last Muslim rule over Palestine, collapsed. And the region, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, as we know it today, those areas were divided up by European powers.
Is this the Balfour Declaration?
Well, I'm going to talk about the Balfour, but there was something called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where the French and the British sat down on a table like this, had a map, and they're like, all right, let's draw some lines right here. This is going to be Iraq. This is going to be Jordan. This is going to be Lebanon. This is how they did it. And we'll take that. We'll take this. The French took Syria, Lebanon. The British took Jordan, Palestine, and Iraq. So you're talking about a colonial entity taking over Muslim land.
Yeah.
Land that was majority Muslim.
Occupation.
So the British began their mandate in the 1910s, right after World War I. The British committed to the Zionist movement. Now, for those of your listeners who don't know what Zionist movement is, it was a movement that started in the late 1800s.
Jazakallah khairan. This is a great point to break down because this term Zionist is used a lot, and many people think they know, but they don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And to clarify even the origins, it's going to put many things in perspective as to why it is the way it is. Afwan, go ahead.
No. I'm glad you wanted to emphasize that because this is a very critical point. And this is a good point for us to also make the argument that this isn't a problem between Muslims and Jews.
Yeah.
This is a conflict against the ideology of Zionism that created this whole mess in the first place. And so this movement called the Zionist movement, the sort of the intellectual brain behind the idea of Zionism is a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, who was an Austrian European dude, Jewish, didn't really believe in God though. He was like Jewish, he wasn't like that strongly Jewish. Came up with this concept that in Europe, Jews were being oppressed. The only way that we can find safety and security is if we establish our own state. Mind you, Theodor Herzl emerged in a period where the British, the French, all the European colonial powers were colonizing the world, right? The entire world was colonized by Europe.
Yeah.
So they modeled their ideas on state building and establishing a homeland on the colonial model that the Europeans had established around the world already.
So just quickly, this was before.
This is before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
Okay,
This is the late 1800s,
okay. Good.
early 1900s.
Okay.
So then the Zionist movement started planning how they wanted to do it, where they wanted to establish their state. They finally coalesced around the idea of doing it in Palestine because of the historical Jewish connection to Palestine and the fact that the British were going to control Palestine. Because mind you, even before the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the Ottomans had already lost a lot of territory, right? They had lost Egypt, they had lost all of North Africa, due to French occupation and colonization. They had lost all of Eastern Europe already, so there was huge chunks of land that were gone. So it was clear that the Ottomans were going to lose a lot of territory. So the British, even before they had full control over Palestine, the Balfour, Lord Arthur Balfour, who was a representative of the British government, made a promise to the head of the Zionist movement in the UK. His name was Rothschild. And that's what became known as famously known as the Balfour Declaration, where it basically fully committed the British to the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the land of Palestine. That's what it was called in the document as well.
Was this before World War II?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So this is not any conspiracy. Somebody may say, this guy's making this all up. It's not true, because we know that
this is 30 years before. This is 30 years before 1947. This is 30 years before the State of Israel was established. World War II started in the late 1930s, right? 1939, and ended in 1945. So you had this period where the British were ruling Palestine from 1917 to 1947, 30 years.
Wow.
Whereby they facilitated the establishment of a Jewish homeland by bringing in Jews from across Europe. And it wasn't because the British loved Jews. It was actually because of the opposite. Europeans had what's called a Jewish problem. They wanted to get rid of Jews.
This is a great segue, just quickly, because you mentioned earlier that the Europeans, you mentioned something, you alluded something about their relationship with the Jews. How has the relationship been historically between the Europeans and the Jews?
Very, very terrible.
Compared to the Muslims.
Yeah. I mean, there's a stark difference.
Yeah.
The Jews were enduring pogroms and massacres and ethnic cleansing and genocide, as we saw in the Holocaust in Europe. In the Muslim world, they never experienced it.
Even before that, with the Crusades and all that, the Jews were being blamed for everything. And so when they were running away, where were they fleeing to? Where were they seeking refuge?
I mean, if you look at ancient, not ancient, medieval history, you look at when the Muslims and Jews were kicked out of Spain, for example, in 1492.
Yeah.
With the Spanish Inquisition.
Yes.
Where did the Jews go? Did they go to Germany? No. They went to Turkey. They went to Ottoman Empire. They went to Morocco. They went to Libya. They went to Tunis.
They wanted to be with, it sounds like, in Muslim production.
Yeah, they all settled in Muslim lands, and they all left with the Muslims that left Spain. So, and then they some of them gained high government positions in the Ottoman Empire, and this is written about, well documented. It's not nothing new, So. There's someone, I forget the name of the author, who wrote a whole book called The Golden Age of Judaism. And he talks about this.
It was Firas al-Khatib. He wrote, not Golden Age of Judaism. He wrote the...
There was a Jewish author who wrote a book.
Okay.
Yeah. But Firas al-Khatib writes a lot about the lost Islamic history.
That was a good book.
Yeah. So that's a good book.
Also highlighted some of
Yeah,
this.
so that's a myth. We need to shatter that myth, So now we're at the Zionist movement. Okay. Now the British have committed themselves to the establishment of the State of Israel. Now for 30 years, from 1917 to 1947, the British are facilitating this process by which they're bringing in Jewish settlers to Palestine. They're usurping Palestinian land. They're arming these settlers. The British were allowing these Zionist settlers to arm themselves, to train, while at the same time not allowing the Palestinians to do the same. So if you look at the history books and you read, the Palestinians were not allowed to organize politically.
No.
So they were not given any political sovereignty by the British.
Yeah.
The Palestinians were not allowed to set up, for example, like their own, like they, the Palestinian Arab Congress, for example, they set themselves up, they set it up on their own,
Wow.
autonomously, and then the British would not recognize it. Oh, they're like, this is not who we want to work with. So they would select certain Palestinians that they would be working with as representatives of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
They even tried to set up their own like Islamic leadership, and they selected Al-Hajj Al-Amin Husseini, who was a famous, very famous Jerusalemite Palestinian who was selected by the British to be the representative of the Palestinians, right? And so it's interesting. They had a whole setup. It was designed to prevent the rise of a Palestinian national entity, right? Despite the fact that Palestinians were organizing themselves. So the Palestinians revolted against this. There was multiple incidents where the Palestinians fought the British on the ground to build their own state.
I want to ask you initially, okay, so now some of these Jews are coming from the situation of what's known as the Holocaust.
Yes, World War II.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're being moved. Some are coming from Europe. Some are coming from
Eastern
different
Europe
places.
mainly. Yeah.
Right. So
Russia.
Right. So now, when they're entering the Holy Lands, is there any resistance from the Palestinians, or is there welcome? This is what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed reaction. On one hand, the Palestinians understood early on what the Zionist project was about. They knew that it was about establishing the Jewish homeland in Palestine. So they were not naive to that fact. And actually, if you go back and read early Palestinian newspapers like Al-Karmel and others, back in 1917 when Balfour announced the declaration, Palestinians were openly rejecting it already. It was clear, we get what's happening.
It wasn't
here.
like they're hiding it.
No. However, initially the amount of Jewish settlers in Palestine was small, so it didn't seem that significant. Like it was like, oh, okay, and initially the settlements that they were building needed Palestinian labor to help set them up and also like cultivate the land, because they're Europeans, they don't know how to deal with our land. So the Palestinians were worried, but then eventually those dynamics changed. And then you saw the dispossession of Palestinians intensify.
Wow.
And then you saw the economic disenfranchisement of Palestinians intensify. And so that's where you saw things come to a head in 1936 when the Palestinians revolted against the British in a 3-year revolt. We refer to it as the Great Arab Revolt, and because it was a revolt generally in all the Sham region. But that's where you see a lot of the action. But that's where the British really destroyed the idea of a Palestinian national entity, because they went hard.
And they continue to repress it.
And they repressed it so hard that by the time 1947 came around, the Palestinians hadn't fully recovered yet from that, the killing of Palestinian leaders, the imprisonment of them, the taking of all the weapons. All that was happening during that period when the British clamped down on the Palestinians. So anyway, now we have the prelude to 1947. We haven't even reached the Nakba yet, right? We haven't reached the Nakba.
We haven't reached a lot. I think Sheikh Jarrah and all that.
We haven't reached all that stuff yet. So now we're coming to the point where, okay, the British announced that they're leaving Palestine in 1948. They announced it.
Okay.
And then at that time we had an entity in the world called the League of Nations, which the United Nations sort of became what the League of Nations was, right? It sort of inherited that model of global governance, or whatever you want to call it. And so the British made it clear that they're leaving, but it was unclear what was going to happen next. And so they were coming up with different solutions. The League of Nations proposed establishing 2 states, one Jewish, one Palestinian, on the land of Palestine. The problem was the Palestinians weren't being consulted about what the solution was going to be. And the other problem was they were giving the close to 500,000 Jews the vast majority of the land, when the Palestinians were 1.5 million in number, so 3 times the number of Palestinians. So Palestinians were being dispossessed already before the Nakba through these international proposals to divvy up the land and give it to Jews. So that was number one. The second thing that's important to know is that the Zionist movement, with their militias that they had set up at the time, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, which were terrorist organizations according to the British even, were planning a very big execution plan for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They were preparing for years of how they were going to remove Palestinians from their towns and villages so that they can create a demographic balance in those areas so that they can establish the state of Israel once the British leave.
Forcefully, okay.
And so there was a very famous Israeli scholar who wrote a whole book on this subject called Ilan Pappé. He took archival materials from the Israelis themselves and discovered something called Plan Dalet, which was the plan that they used to operate and manifest the Nakba, as we know it today. So 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their homes between 1947 and 1949. Thousands of Palestinians were killed. 500 Palestinian towns and villages were depopulated and removed and destroyed. Some of them were taken over by settlers. Others were just destroyed, and some have not been touched. Basically, they're still the same. And so you're talking about a massive catastrophe. 1.5 million Palestinians, 750,000 of them now displaced in that period. This was a major catastrophe. The whole world saw it. It was the first thing that the UN had to deal with as an entity, a global entity. The UN organizations were set up basically to deal with the refugee crisis. You had people displaced, and people sort of went into different directions. The people who were in the northern Palestine region, they either went to Syria or Lebanon. The people who were in the east of Palestine, a lot of them went to Jordan. And then the people who were in the middle, in their surrounding areas between Gaza and the West Bank, went to either Gaza or what's known today as the West Bank, and they settled there. So Gaza, the population of Gaza as we know it today, the vast majority, 3/4 of them, probably if not more, are refugees or the descendants of refugees. Right, you have 2.2 million Gazans today.
So you have also not just people who have seen these things through generation, but you have generational refugee status. Going on.
Yeah. So we've had people who've been refugeed more than once. So for example, like they lost their home in 1948, and then when Israel invaded Gaza in 1967, they lost their home again. And then when they were bombed in 2008, they lost their home again. So people have been like multiply displaced in Palestine on multiple occasions, and that's ridiculous. I mean, that's insanity to have to deal with that experience. So until you're talking about from 1917 to 2023, more than 100 years of colonization and occupation, intensified by the advent of the State of Israel, intensified by the system of apartheid that Israel has imposed on the Palestinians. And we can talk about apartheid a little bit in a minute. Occupation is a violent thing. It's a daily violence. It's not like, people sometimes, they don't really fully grasp the idea of what occupation means. Because we've been talking about occupation for so long. People are like, they're under occupation. But like, bro, if you have an army in your neighborhood that has a curfew for you, you can't leave your house at a certain time. In order for you to leave to the next town from St. Paul to Minneapolis, you have to go through checkpoints. You have a special ID that the Israelis can recognize whether or not that you're allowed to go to certain places. You have to have a special permit to go, for example, to go pray at Dar al-Faruq. Okay? Your water supply is cut. You don't have access to your own your own land. You don't have access to your own land to cultivate it. You have to ask the Israelis to allow you to do it. And then when you do cultivate it, you want to go sell your products to the Israelis to collect taxes on it. And then when you want to export your products to other countries, the Israelis collect money on that too. So what kind of life is that? You're fully captive.
This is why they call it the biggest air prison.
Right, the largest open air prison in the world. And that's Gaza. Gaza's situation is even worse because for the past 16 years, since 2007, the Gazan people have been under a complete air, sea, and land blockade. Okay, so people are in this 120 square mile place. Okay, it's probably the size of DC, like twice the size of DC, if you've been to Washington, DC. And you have 2.1 million people. DC has 600,000 people. If you go there, you're like, oh man, this is crazy. And so, subhanAllah, like you're in this situation, you realize what the Gazans have been going through. You realize what the Palestinian people have been going through. The amount of land that we've lost in the past 100 years. The Masjid al-Aqsa being attacked and controlled by the Israelis. And we know what they plan to do with Masjid al-Aqsa, by the way, because we've seen what they've done in other masajid in Palestine. So, for example, in Al-Khalil, we have a town or city, one of the biggest cities in Palestine is called Al-Khalil. They call it Hebron. Al-Khalil is called Al-Khalil because that's where Ibrahim alayhi salam.
I think
what's
his name? Ja'bari is that's where he's from.
Oh,
one of our
students. Yeah. So a lot of Palestinians in Minneapolis are from Al-Khalil.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
Al-Khalil, there's a masjid there, Haram al-Ibrahimi, they call it. Okay, Haram al-Ibrahimi in the 1990s, during Salat al-Tarawih. All right, people are praying Salat al-Tarawih in the masjid. An American Israeli guy named Baruch Goldstein walks into the masjid with an automatic weapon and just fires on everyone. Right. Kills dozens of people. He gets beaten down, killed himself. What do the Israelis do when they respond to this? How do they respond to this, the Israelis? They lock down Masjid al-Ibrahimi. They lock down the masjid. They split the masjid. They give half to the Israeli settlers, and the other half is allowed for Muslims only. They cut the adhan, they're not allowed to make adhan. Okay? And they took over the masjid. They basically control the masjid. And so what people are seeing in Masjid al-Aqsa now, they're like, oh, you guys want to apply that model to Masjid al-Aqsa? No. And that's why the murabitin are important. The people who are staying steadfast, who are holding ground, because they're preventing that from happening. The hope for the Palestinians was that if Masjid al-Aqsa is attacked, and because of its importance to the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and its importance in the creed, in the nas of the Quran, Subhan alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-Masjid al-Harami ila al-Masjid al-Aqsa, you would think that the ummah would rise up to defend this masjid that's not only for us, it's for all the Muslims. So the Palestinians who don't see that response from the ummah know that the Israelis at any moment could just take it and nobody will say anything. So they're the last line of defense for the ummah on this. They're the last line of defense right now. They're the ones putting up the fight.
And this is a shame. This is a shame on the rest of us. Is that with those individuals that have sacrificed their lives, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored them with the shahada. He has honored them and they have victory. But for the rest of us, it's like a spit in our face. You know, it's a big disgrace, unfortunately. And this is like, for example, Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib in the battle of Uhud. He was named in that battle after his martyrdom. Hamza, he's Asad Allah wa Rasulah. So he is the line of Allah and His Messenger. But we know that there was a devastating setback for the Muslims, you see. But for individuals like those people who are standing their ground, we ask Allah to keep them steadfast and to send them support from As-Samawah. You know, and so these are things that are disheartening. And we will say to the viewers, if hearing these things, the desecration of these type of masajid, the houses of Allah Azza wa Jal, the third holiest site of Islam, if it doesn't at least make the hair of your body stand, then this puts into question our iman.
Absolutely.
This puts into question our iman. And some people say, well, I can't take a plane there or something. But if this, like, you can hear this, listen to this, and just be completely like, you know, stoic, you don't feel anything, then who are we? What Muslims are we?
Yeah, we got to check our hearts.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So
and that's like we could watch Masjid al-Aqsa, and then for me, I see my family in Gaza, and I'm like, how could people not care? How could people not be moved to take serious action to end this? And subhanAllah, you know, as Palestinians, we read a lot. We read a lot of history. We're very engaged politically because our situation is very prevalent in that regard. And so you'll never find a Palestinian who doesn't know the history like that. You know, like we're mostly very well immersed in that.
Sorry.
And so what we do is we look at historical precedent, like what happened before us, you know, before this, and we look at the Crusades and Salahuddin, for example. You know, the Crusaders controlled Masjid al-Aqsa for 88
at one point,
for 88 years.
Yeah.
And Israel's only been around for 75 years. But the Ummah at the time was shattered, was divided.
Yeah.
You had different Muslim autonomous regions. The Abbasi Khilafah was weak.
Very weak.
You had the Fatimids in Egypt. You had a bunch of little fiefdoms in Syria.
Yes.
That each guy controls his own little region.
No.
You know, you had, you know, just a lot of corruption.
The Zengid.
Right. The Zengis had started, the Zengi had started up in the Sham. And so it was a mess.
Yes.
It was a mess. And for a man like Salahuddin to emerge and unite people in the fight
out of the ashes,
against the Crusaders was a miracle if you look at it. I mean, it was something that Allah subhanahu, it was divine intervention.
He was definitely assisted by Allah. This was definitely divine.
And but we always look, okay, what led to the rise of Salahuddin? What led to someone to have that commitment and level of integrity and exceptional character and spiritual strength to handle such a task, to beat the mighty armies of Europe that had taken over Masjid al-Aqsa, right? And subhanAllah, you look at that and you look at, you know, Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, who played a major influence on him. You look at Al-Qadi al-Fadil, who was his main advisor and his spiritual sort of advisor. You know, you look at all these figures around Salahuddin and you realize, okay, he had a squad.
Yeah.
And he had an environment that was created through the education system that the Zengids had started in really bringing the Ummah into the idea that, you know, we need to have a revival. We cannot allow this to persist. We cannot allow this cancer to fester and to spread. Right? But you look at Salahuddin, he cleaned up house.
He did.
He cleaned up house real good.
And then majority of the time he was fighting
he fought a lot of Muslims.
He was fighting Muslims longer than he did the Christians.
He did. He fought a lot of Muslims.
Yeah.
I mean, he's best known for his victory in Egypt in destroying the Fatimids and making Al-Azhar a Sunni institution.
Yeah.
And of course his famous battle Hittin and destroying the Crusaders and taking over Jerusalem. Those are his famous victories. But a lot of people don't understand that, like, Salahuddin's biggest victory was the way he influenced people. Because he was such an exceptional human being.
He was, yeah.
He was noble.
Yeah.
He was chivalrous. He was respectful. And people respected him for that. People loved him for that. Even his enemies, the guys that in the Ummah that didn't like him, ended up fighting alongside him.
Yeah, eventually they did.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they were like, all right, maybe I don't like him personally, but I like what he's doing. I like what he's doing.
And I think what you're saying is it speaks volumes. I think we really need to pay attention. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So you have the situation, the environment, and the upbringing, the tarbiyah is very important.
Yeah.
He grew up in that sort of, like, you know, the ummah's on his knees sort of situation. It's just everybody's doing this prince is doing his own thing, this, you know, and so we're kind of in that same situation too right now. But it didn't stop him.
No.
Like many people, most people will look at this situation and say, okay, what can I do except dua?
Yeah.
What can I do?
And that's the point we need to talk about. We need to address this.
Yeah, because this is like such a defeatist mentality. Dua has a great station in our deen, but at the same time, people use it as, like, you know, the last resort, but it's like the only resort that they ever have.
Yeah.
They don't have anything else. Everything. What can we do except dua? And then it's like you look at their lifestyle and you assess it. And these are not people that want change.
No.
These are not people that want change. And so the thing about Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, and this is, again, we want to plug everybody in, make sure that you are learning your history.
That's right.
There's two things you need as a Muslim today, is you need to know Tarikh and you need to know your Aqidah.
That's right.
You need to know where you came from. You need to know where you're at right now and where you're going.
That's right.
These are three important things. And
That's fundamental.
Salahuddin, yes.
Barakallahu feek.
وفيك بارك and Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he had great mentors,
Yeah.
great teachers, but he also grew up in although it was a military environment, he also grew up in a very spiritual, deeply spiritual environment. I think for us, we need to understand and we need to remind ourselves that this Deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent, هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على دين كله ولو كره المشركون. This is very important. Even if the disbelievers like it, even if the mushrikeen, they dislike it, even if all of these enemies, they dislike it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will perfect his light, and his way of life that he has ordained for human beings to follow will supersede over every single way of life, whether or not me and you assist. Right? And Allah will bring victory to this ummah, whether or not me or you assist.
Exactly.
But I would like to be a part of that honor.
You Question is whether or not I'm going to be used by Allah to gain that victory. And that's what you want to ask Allah for.
Absolutely.
Ya Allah, use me.
Yes.
تخدمني ولا تستبدلني.
Subhanallah. And so this is where we all need to really wake up at this moment and think to ourselves, wallahi, there's a lot more you can do than just dua, right? And just like you said, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, not only did he was someone that had a lot of aspiration, but he also had a lot of inspiration on this ummah.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just himself. He inspired
he
many
became a larger than life figure.
Absolutely, yeah.
The Europeans claimed him.
Yes.
The Europeans couldn't believe that Salahuddin was Muslim, bro. They had to make up a myth that his mom was Christian. They're like, yeah, this guy had to be Christian.
And so you see, these are important things. Even his arch enemy, Richard the Lionheart.
That's right.
Admired him. Like, he was like his biggest fan in secret. He's like, what do you say about me? All these things. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so we have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give justice to the oppressed. He will give victory to this ummah.
It's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time. Now, we can all sit down and play the feeble game and say, you know what? It's bad. It's looking bad. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing I can do. You can do that. Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always guarantee, He guaranteed us through the Prophet ﷺ that there will always be people in this ummah that will raise the banner of La ilaha illallah wherever they are. Right? And it may be the people that look like the most disenfranchised to us.
That's right.
And that's how the Sahaba were in the Battle of Badr. So who are these people, ragtags, coming with one?
You never know who the awliya are going to be.
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
Who the special people are going to be.
So now I want to move on to the
let's talk about that. Because this.
Okay, go ahead.
You want to talk about what to do. And look, some people are going to be like, I'm over here. I don't know that much about the situation. Yeah. All I know is, as Muslims, we should care about Palestine, but I don't know what to do.
SubhanAllah.
You know what I'm saying? Those people I'm cool with, because they're gonna come to me and be like, all right, what should we do?
Yeah, get educated.
The people that I'm not cool with are the people who, whenever you offer them something to do, they'll tell you, brother, that's not my way. I don't do protests. I'm not gonna. I don't engage in politics. Okay, that to me is cowardice, because you're absolving yourself of the responsibility, and you cannot do that. You don't have the privilege of doing that. You need to step up, brother. You're a Muslim. You step up.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I've heard this rhetoric from people where we need to subhanAllah, we need to cleanse our hearts first before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru. Okay, bro, that's not how it works, brother.
Yeah.
That's not how the Sahaba even viewed that. Otherwise, they would have just stayed in Medina and just chilled.
Yeah.
They would have never opened the lands to Islam.
They're proactive.
Right? So that kind of logic and that rhetoric is bogus. Straight up. And if you don't know, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ.
No.
This is basic advice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it to us.
No.
You know what I mean? And you want to follow the leader. You want to follow the command of the people who are the most immersed in that field, in that subject. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to go lead Tarawih because I'm not a hafiz. I'm not going to stand up on a minbar and talk about fiqh issues because I'm not a sheikh. But I do know this issue. Okay? وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. So it's basic.
Yeah.
Okay? So you come to me and be like, all right, I know what the most effective ways and tools to approach Palestine here in America. If I come and tell you, brother, we need to protest, it's because I understand the efficacy of that tactic in that moment. Is the protest the end all for all? No. Is it a means to achieve something? Yes.
This is actually something I want to ask you about, because protesting has been one of the I would say like maybe polarizing a form of efforts. So tell me, what has been like practically?
Yeah.
What has came about? What has been some of the positive aspects of protesting?
Yeah.
Because I can see the criticism that people will give and say, well, you know, what are we doing protesting? You know, we're going to be in the streets, we're going to have signs, and we're going to go home.
Yeah.
So talk about, what do you think?
That critique is for those who don't engage the work after coming to the protest. The protest is meant to be the moment where people gather in collective rage, in righteous indignation, demanding a change in the public sphere. Because we're marching in the streets of Minneapolis. We're marching in the streets of Washington, D.C., in New York City in Times Square, in Chicago, Illinois on Miracle Mile. Everywhere in the country, you're seeing massive protests and massive demonstrations in the tens of thousands of people, right? That's amazing. That's fascinating, because that shows that the community is coming out in strength. And that also shows the average American and the politicians that these guys can mobilize. Right? Yeah. So that's important for us. We need to continue doing that. That's number one. But the other aspect of it is, if we leave the protest thinking that that's it, then that's our fault. That's organizers' fault. Because that's not the objective of this.
Yeah.
We want to take that momentum that we've built through mass mobilization, like a protest, and convert it into policy change.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why for us, we want people to come to the protest, and then after that, when I send you an action alert on an email, you fill out the action alert. Simple. You do it from your home, man. Yeah. When I tell you to call your congressman, it's because I know that I need 5,000 phone calls to the congressman so I can get him to move, so I can get him to worry about this issue. And if you're saying to me, I'm not going to respond to that call because nothing's going to change, then you don't understand, bro. Then you don't understand. And so some people are like, look, you know, all these politicians are all corrupt, they're all this and that. Okay, cool. So we should just sit back and just let them do their thing then? So that's the problem that I have, because then you're leaving the vacuum. You're leaving the vacuum for the Zionists on the other side to just run the game the way they want.
So for politicians, I've noticed that many of them are going to, even if they have some sort of sympathy, are going to lean towards Israel anyways, and whatever appeasement. Right. So how would you address that sort of critique? Somebody says, well, I mean, they're all going to...
Don't look at a politician as your friend. Don't look at a politician as your friend.
Okay.
Don't look at a politician as a representative of your community.
Okay.
Look at a politician as a means to achieve a goal. Look at them as a tool to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Once you start thinking about things that way, then you start wanting to maneuver and work these politicians the way you want them to work. You think we don't have the resources in our community to make politicians worry? We do. We've done it before too. And that's what we're getting better and better at doing.
Yeah.
Right? And yes, changing America and U.S. policy towards Israel is a monumental task.
Yes, that's big.
Ain't nobody lying about it. We're not going to come here and tell you, oh, we got this. We're doing it.
Yeah.
No. We're not going to lie to you. It's an uphill battle. But what we're saying is, if at least in America, in the comfort of these nice luxury buildings that we're living in, we're not engaging in the work that can alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people right now, then that's on us, bro.
I think for this aspect here, when it comes to the politics, it gets very, very messy. I think what we have seen through different types of raising of awareness through social media, which by the way we didn't get to talk about social media versus mainstream,
very critical,
right? Because before there was very little social media, if there was any, and there was all mainstream.
Right.
And mainstream is what people relied on. And so the people are now starting to be a little bit more wary and cautious
absolutely
about the mainstream, because they actually see live videos of this stuff happening.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, how are you saying that?
Yeah.
But look at this here,
Yeah.
right? And so that has been also a positive aspect. But making people more aware about it, I've seen that it does have, it does shift the momentum
Yes, absolutely.
to people being, at least if they're not going to support Israel, they're going to at least be neutral.
Exactly.
And stay out of it,
Exactly.
right? And then there has been more people over the years that have been in more support towards Palestine. Say, hey, man, this is right. And oppressed people who've actually been through some of the same stuff are now like, yo, like this is crazy. How is this happening? So we've seen that the IRA, and so you have the Irish that have been very vocal in different parliamentary bodies in support of the Palestinians. And so we see a growing number of non-Muslims supporting. We see a lot of Muslims in different Muslim countries that are mobilizing. The people there are not like the governments too.
Yeah.
We also have to, sometimes the government will have a stance.
Yeah, yeah.
And the people,
Yeah.
it's opposite of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about quickly the shift of mainstream media versus social media and how powerful it's been to sway the minds.
I mean, the media landscape has changed dramatically with the advent of social media.
Yeah.
And Israel, since 2008, has had a major PR problem because it could no longer cover up what was taking place on the ground. Where before, the mainstream media outlets were the only way people were consuming media. Yes. But now, most people are getting their news through social media. If you ask the average American, how do you get your news? Oh, Facebook. Yeah. Oh, Instagram. Oh, Twitter.
Yeah.
And so they're not like sitting down on the TV all day watching CNN. Yeah. So even the media outlets, they started cutting up videos and putting them on. That's how people are watching their stuff.
I've noticed there's like podcast platforms that are more viewed than CNN and Fox.
So that's the reality now. So what happened with that is it gave all of us with our devices the ability to produce media, to produce content. That's number one. But the other thing is it allowed us to have a direct engagement with the media that's being produced. So for example, CNN posted an interview with an Israeli lady, for example, talking about her suffering and all that, and what happened. So all these people started commenting. I look at the comments. At first I watch the video and then I look at the comments. And subhanallah, man, the big difference that we're seeing now is that the American public is engaging with this and critiquing the way that the media is covering this. They're like, what about Palestinian suffering? What about those Palestinian victims that you guys haven't talked about? And so CNN and all these they're responding to this feedback now because now they're getting attacked online.
They're pressured. They have to say something.
So now, like you see, like Wolf Blitzer interviewing a doctor in Gaza. Oh, now you see Jake Tapper interviewing a Palestinian American woman who's trapped in Gaza. They're like, oh, he's trying to pretend like he cares about her. Please, we need to get you out of here. You're not Hamas. You need to be so that's very important. When you're on social media and you're just browsing, just going through all day scrolling through Instagram, and you see something, don't let it go.
Yeah.
Comment. LeBron James just posted a condemnation statement yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I commented, a bunch of people were commenting. Omar Suleiman today hit him hard with a beautiful comment. He went off on him, right? But like that kind of stuff, they look at. You think they don't look at their feed? They're looking at it. They see those comments. They see what's going on. And so that stuff has an impact. So even the next time he thinks about talking about this issue, he's gonna know, you know what? Maybe either he makes a better statement or he just doesn't do it himself. I don't. Right. So, and we're seeing this all over. Like the NBA Players Association posted a statement. MLS posted a statement. All these random like New York Jets, like all these random companies and people are all like acting like they care about stuff and posting condemnations now, which is interesting because there's almost like this social pressure on celebrities to comment on this, right? And it's coming from the people who felt like they lost a lot of ground. The Zionists lost a lot of ground in 2021 when Sheikh Jarrah was getting attacked, when Al-Aqsa was getting attacked, and the media really focused on Israel's crimes as the reason for this. They lost a lot of ground, and now they're trying to retake that ground with this. They're trying to blame it on Hamas. They're trying to say, oh, look, there's nothing we can do to solve this because look at what Hamas is. Look how bloodthirsty they are.
You know,
right? And so they're using them as an excuse to basically say, no. All of this Palestine talk is bogus. We need to shut it all down because look what ends up happening, right? And that's what's happening all across the country right now. They're trying to shut down student groups. They're trying to shut down academics and professors who are talking about it. They're trying to shut down Muslim and Arab organizations that work for Palestine in the United States. They're reframing,
labeling to
they're reframing protests as Hamas rallies.
Yes, and
Right.
So if you are in support of the Gazans, one of the terms that you'll be called is a terrorist. You're a terrorist sympathizer.
So we're seeing like some 9/11 type language. I mean, I don't know if you were around at the 9/11. I was about 12 years old, and I'm remembering now like it's like bringing stuff back to me. Like these dudes they're going out. They start using this counterterrorism language. And the thing is, the U.S. government is like actively engaged in this type of rhetoric. When President Biden 2 days ago made a statement condemning the attacks, and then saying that we were mobilizing federal and local law enforcement to investigate any potential domestic terrorism threat that could be tied to this situation. What does that mean?
Look at that.
What does that mean?
Anyone who
That's a veiled threat to the Muslim community. We're coming after you if you talk about this. So my brothers and sisters, we need to be prepared. For what's to come, and whether or not you're engaged in Palestine work, you're going to become a target.
Yes, you're a Muslim.
That's it. We've been racialized in a way. Where we've become a target. So you either do something about it, or you sit back.
It's going to catch up to you. It's going to catch up to you.
It's going to catch up to you.
Well, Brother Tāhir, this is very informative. I mean, we could talk all night about this. There's a couple of things too that I didn't get to. We didn't get to touch on. I remember now what I was going to say was I spoke to some of my students today about this because one of them was playing around with the water bottle, just like they were just kind of joking around. And then I explained to them this whole situation, and so a lot of them were like they were really paying attention and they were shocked at some of the when you explain to them the waqiyah, the reality of our brothers and sisters when it comes to water and just simple things like that we take for granted. And I said to them, do you guys understand now how easy it is for us to just not care? It's very, very easy just to go and just have your top ramen noodles and to just, and then even like the small little things we do, we feel so accomplished. Like, hey, man, I wrote something today on my story. And so I did my part, right? And we owe so much more.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we owe so much more. I want to bring us back to one of the points is when Umar ibn al-Khattab, who he opened up or he was given the access, the keys to the city of Jerusalem. When he was invited and he eventually met the archbishop, and they were crying in that whole situation. The whole story is documented both in Muslim sources and also in Christian sources as well. He was with Abu Ubaidah, and this is how Allah shows you that He raises people,
their status.
Yes, who humble themselves to Him, right? And so it can be any one of us, anybody who's watching. Can be the next, Salahuddin. We can be the next Umar ibn al-Khattab to be that individual to raise the ummah out of the ashes. It will happen. It's just a matter of time. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he's with Abu Ubaidah. And after everything, they get the keys, and some of the people are praising Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he goes with Abu Ubaidah, and he goes to a tree, and after, imagine this, they were with the Prophet ﷺ, they did all these accomplishments. Umar he's a caliph, he's a khalifa.
That's the moment.
And so they go by the tree and they're crying, and they said, subhanAllah, they said, how little we've done. How little we've done for the deen of Allah, subhanAllah.
Wow.
And what have we done? What have we done? Ultimately, if we are always quoting these ahadith about we're one body, and if this part of the body gets hurt and that part of the body, and we do this, Sadaqa Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but at the same time, are we really feeling something, or are these just quotes that we use for fundraising? Are these just quotes we use for events? Right? Are we people who are actually feeling and bleeding for them? Are we people who cower down when, we're in public spaces? We don't want to show our support for our brothers and sisters. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we owe so much more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. So Allah doesn't change the people until they change themselves. And so even if you can't go, because I know there's some smart people where you say, well, I can't go there. What do you want me to do, brother? You can start with yourself.
You can find something to do.
Yeah. There's always
You
something
can give yourself
to do.
an excuse.
There's always something to do.
No.
Right? And so if it's from dunub, or if it's supporting the sha'ab in themselves, right? But the point is, we need to be a little bit more vocal.
Absolutely.
We need to raise the
most
bar.
important thing.
You see, we need to be a little bit more amplified.
Well, I appreciate you said that.
And we can't be people that are cowering around and hiding and all these things. We need to be visible, right? We can't hide anymore. We don't care what they call us. But this is a point now where this is between Iman and Kufr at this point. This Masjid al-Aqsa is an Aqidah issue for us. It's not something that's just is just the Palestinians, bro. No, this is Aqidah for us, right?
Absolutely.
Not just Masjid al-Aqsa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَبَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ. All around it, He has blessed it. You understand? And so that place must be more beloved to me than my own house, my own country, my own city, wherever it is.
The land of the prophets.
It must be
the land
there,
where the Sahaba are buried.
right? And so, wallahi, let's be a little bit more vigilant. Let's be present. Let's show up for our brothers and sisters. Dua is very important. Make your dua a prayer to tahajjud. Ibadah is very important. But at the same time, don't cower away. Don't cower away when people are criticizing you. Don't. It doesn't matter what they call you, right? Because at the end of the day, if we are people that are Muslims, then we need to be like Muslims. We need to behave like Muslims. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aminu.
That's right.
Oh, you who believe, believe. Right? Oh, you who believe, believe. This is what He says. SubhanAllah. And so we need to answer to that call. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu stajibu lillahi wa lirasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. Let's answer to this call. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist our brothers and sisters. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep them steadfast. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise this ummah up out of the ashes. And to return to us the izzah. And to remove any sort of cowardice from our hearts. And to put inside of us the pride of Islam. And the pride of being a mu'min and a believer. Right? And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept as shuhada all of those that have passed away. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to illuminate their graves. What else would you like to say? This is your last message to the people. What would you add after this?
The thing that I would love to end this with is to always have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That despite the circumstances of the current situation, and I'm talking to my family in Gaza.
SubhanAllah.
I'm looking and watching the people in Gaza. And subhanAllah, despite the desperate, incredibly difficult situation, they come out with a positive energy.
SubhanAllah, wow.
Because they have full yaqeen that Allah will give them victory. Whether they survive or not, they know that it's coming. And so if those people in that situation could have that fortitude, what about us? What about us?
Yes.
And we seek inspiration from them, subhanAllah. Despite the fact that we should be the mu'een for them, they are the mu'een for us. They're the ones who are inspiring us. They're the ones who are giving us that fortitude, that strength that we need to continue to do this work. SubhanAllah, man. I've been doing this. I've been engaged in Palestine work for more than 15 years. And I'll tell you, it's whenever these type of situations occur that I have like this renewed energy to continue this work, to recommit my life to this cause, right? And I get it from them. I get it from these people who are the man who just pulled his daughter from under the rubble, and he's holding her. She's dead. She's gone, and he's like, "We're not shaken. We're not shaken. We're gonna come and get you." Subhanallah, man. Yeah. So in that situation, you feel shame when you are at home, just on your phone, wasting time, when you could be engaged in this historic struggle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in this moment in time. We don't live in the past, and we're not going to live in the future. We live right now. So we either choose the path of kasal and ajaz, or we choose the path of amal and izzah. And that's what I leave our community with.
Jazakumullah khair. Guys, wallahi, subhanallah, we don't say this to, well, I was going to say we don't say this to make anybody feel, we should all feel bad, though. We should all feel bad, honestly. I think the situation has gotten worse. Now, of course, everything is in the hands of Allah Azza wa Jal, but at the same time, Allah has placed into our hands responsibilities as well. And we're the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal for a lot of forgiveness. We need to ask, the rest of us need to ask a lot of forgiveness for not doing enough, right? We need to ask Allah to pardon us. May Allah forgive all of us and pardon us and to renew us and to inspire us with the reality. Brother Tāhir, Jazakumullah khairan for coming here, sharing this information with us. Many people learned, and we hope that many people inspire before they expire. And with that, we'll leave you all. And like I said, under these circumstances, things are a bit bitter, but there is a sense of sweetness.
Yes.
There's a sense of increasing of the iman, and we ask Allah to bless us all with that. Until next time, and we hope that all of you guys are staying in tune. Continue the support, strengthen the support, and let's make this momentum strong. We're with Gaza, we're with Palestine, we're with all the Muslims. في كل مكان. اللهم انصرنا والإخواننا في كل مكان. اللهم انصرنا والإخواننا في غزة.
آمين.
اللهم انصرهم في الشام. اللهم انصرهم في الشام وفي كل مكان. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Give us your member, bro. MashaAllah. Well, you're a great host, MashaAllah.